World Circus by Toxic. Welcome to Free Thought Radio. I'm your host, Alex Fiddle, here every Monday night from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Check out the show at facebook.com/freethoughtradio. So a bit of a preview for next week's show. My guest is Christina Tobin, who is the founder and chair of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation and was also the ballot access coordinator for Ralph Nader's 2008 campaign. Later in tonight's show, in the third hour, I have my great coverage of my experience at the NAMM show 2013. But getting back to Toxic, the song I just played, my guest for tonight is the lead guitarist of Toxic, Josh Christian. And I would like for all of you to go ahead and Google Prescott Bush, George H.W. Bush's father, because we do mention him a few times during the interview. So I think you should acquaint yourself with who he is and what he did, why it's so important that you're informed on that. So without further ado, joining me now is Josh Christian. He's the lead guitarist of the band Toxic, and that's spelled with a K. Great thrash metal band, released 2 albums under Road Racer Records and toured with King Diamond, and also was vocalist for former Toxic drummer Tad Legger's band Loose Tola up until recently. Very talented dude. Josh, it's great having you on the show. How's it going?
Thanks, brother. Thank you. Very good. Very good. Thank you for having me here.
All right. So what were your influences and how were you developing as a guitarist at the time you decided to start Tokyo, which of course became Toxic?
Well, Tokyo was a garage band. They call garage bands. It was myself and a couple of my friends, playing at our parents' houses and doing the songs of the era. At that time, we played a lot of power metal, a lot of Judas Priest, a lot of Scorpions. That was where our heads were at. But Tokyo was actually an offshoot from another band called Centaur. The real beginning of Toxic is way back when, like early 80s, late even 70s, like 79, 1980. Friend of mine, Lee, the guy, Lee Irwin, who at this point I think a lot of people know who Lee is. Lee was the bass player on the original Toxic demo. He played on the Wasteland demo and was involved in some of the writing for the World Circuit songs. Lee and I had met him through a friend, and he was my first real introduction to metal. In the late 70s, early 80s, metal was really just forming itself as heavy metal. The term heavy metal hadn't really been used yet that much. I mean, I'm sure that there were bands, especially English bands, that had already probably broken that out. But in the States, where I am especially, that wasn't a term that we had really heard. So the first wave of metal was, Judas Priest, Scorpions at that time. Tigers of Pantang was big. Just sort of this like UFO, Michael Schenker, obviously. That era of sort of power hard rock. And Lee was the guy that turned me on to that. He was a few years older than I was. I'd met him through a friend. I went over to his house and he had, Accept and Scorpions. He had all these records. In fact, that's the first time I heard Virgin Killers, Scorpions, which is probably one of my favorite albums of all time. And so we started playing almost immediately because I played guitar and I had a pretty good ear. I was able to pick things out quickly, and he played guitar as well. And we just started sort of jamming. And our original band was called the Photogenics, right? This was the first band. And that was actually punk. We listened to all this metal, but when we got together, our playing level was what it was. We couldn't really play what we liked. So we played punk stuff because we could manage that. And we sounded somewhere like a cross between the Cramps and the Descendants or something, like, again, late 70s, sort of hard, sort of gritty punk stuff that was going on. So the Photogenics was a punk band. So we listened to metal, but we played punk. Centaur was the band that came after that. Centaur was a bit of a softening, was a little more conceptual. We did start to play more power rock because we were getting better as musicians. And at that point, Lee switched to bass full-time, and that's kind of how he assumed his bass position. A couple more years goes by. Now it's 1984, 1985. We come up with the name Tokyo, and we're introduced to Mike. That's when Mike the singer comes along. So that's how Tokyo comes into being. Our influences at that point was everything that I had just mentioned, and then that next wave of metal that started in the early 80s. Iron Maiden at that point was huge. Iron Maiden was a gigantic influence on us. Anthrax was actually, believe it or not, the early incarnations of the thrash scene was starting to kick in. And the Anthrax demo was huge for us. We really rocked out to that. Obviously, No Life to Leather, the Metallica demo was huge. That was that era. It was a great, great time to be around. We were so lucky to be there at that, because this stuff was all brand new, and it was a combination. It had this punk element to it. It was like, I think everybody around the United States did the same thing we did, right? We all really couldn't play what we liked, so we played this sort of punky version of it, and through that, this other kind of music kind of evolved, which was a confluence or a merger of the two styles. So you had power rock that met punk, and that was where thrash really came from. That was the beginning. For me anyway, that was how I heard it. Motorhead, of course, was another one. Venom was huge. When those first records came out, it was like, holy, so there you go. That's it.
Definitely. And so what was the progression of that turning into Toxic?
Pretty short order after that. We realized that, again, that maturing process. You got the first 4 years, you kind of incubate, figure out what you're going to do, then you land on a style. Once we arrived at the style we wanted to do, then it really actually moved pretty quickly. We'd always written a lot of originals. Another thing that I got from Lee, I got to give credit where credit is due. The dude really put me on the track to writing songs very early on. He was like, anybody can play somebody else's stuff. Why don't we do our own thing? And we had always kind of had that. So our songs reflected whatever we were playing at the time. And I'm not going to say we didn't play our share of Motley Crue and that kind of stuff, because we did, because if you wanted to work, if you wanted to play at a bar or play at a roller rink or wherever you could play, you really kind of had to play that stuff. So we did play that, and it did factor in. It all did. All of that early metal, we were all in the same boat. It's funny, I look at Pantera. We did a few gigs with Pantera, and when we played with them, we were the same people, even though they had grown up 3,000 miles away. It was exactly, we'd all watched the same episodes of the Brady Bunch, man, and we all were on the same page with all of it, Dimebag and I sat around and played Kiss songs for 3 hours, It was like on the first time we gigged, because I saw the sticker on his guitar, and I was like, dude, man. And I started to play Snowblind from Ace Frehley's solo record, and he was like, no way, I can't believe you know that. And then that set it off, and we sat and played literally for hours playing Kiss songs. It was crazy.
Was that at the Dynamo where you guys played with him?
No, we played. We actually for Cowboys from Hell. Right before it came out, they did a warm-up tour. Because that record actually had a pretty strong push. The label knew it was going to be something good, and they had them ready. So they put them out on the road in advance of the release of that, and that was when we played with them. Or it had actually just come out. I think a couple of the gigs it was already out. Because initially they were warming up for us. They had warmed up for us twice, and I think we ended up warming up for them the last time, which is what it was. But
yeah,
they were great, man. They were an amazing band. They really had power, and they were something else. So that all took place in a pretty short order. Getting back to your question, I would say once we had solidly hooked up with Mike, it was about a year and a half, and we realized Tokyo wasn't going to work. There was a German band called Tokyo, and their manager had called Mike's house or my mom's house or somebody's house and said, you can't use our name. So we switched it to Toxic. That's how that happened. And within a year of us switching the name to Toxic, we had recorded the demo, and we were signed to Roadrunner or Road Racer at that time.
Sweet. What was the scene like at the time, and how did record companies treat metal bands at the time, and what was the whole process of writing and recording World Circus?
Well, again, the scene was pretty cool. It was spotty. It was sparse, like I think it always is. Metal's funny, it pops up in the weirdest places. And we had a little scene where we were that, allowed us to kind of really hone our chops. We were lucky. We were in a pocket right outside of New York City where there was sort of a hotbed. And, again, bands like Anthrax and Overkill and all sort of came up in the same sort of general club scene. So we actually did have a pretty strong scene. There was a very strong tape trading scene going on. Everybody had boxes. I used to have boxes of cassettes. That's actually how I met Tad. That was how Tad came into. I didn't mention that, but that was how Tad came into the band. Was through another set of mutual friends trading tapes. I met Tad listening to music. Tad introduced me to Merciful Fate. How about that? The first time I heard Merciful Fate was from Tad, and I was like, "Wow, this is great," And I flipped him a couple of things, and my love for the Scorpions and Priest, obviously gelled with his. And of course, he was always a huge Sabbath fan, and I had grown up on Sabbath. I was an enormous Sabbath fan, So that was really how Tad and I clicked. Record companies at the time were like the startups of the whole genre. Road Racer was Road Racer. They weren't even Road Runner. They couldn't actually secure the rights to that name in the United States. They couldn't afford to buy the name from Warner Brothers. So that's actually why they used the name Road Racer in the States as long as they did. Metal Force, or Mega Force rather, Metal Blade, all of those labels were as sort of startup as the bands were that they signed, which was what made it so real and so cool. So the labels were actually run by probably the coolest people on earth, because they were the ones that had ears and said, this is happening, this is what's up, and they were the ones that helped it really get out there. Was it not for the Johnny Z's and the Brian Slagels, none of this would have happened. So total props where props are due. And wherever they went with their companies and who they turned into later on in life is immaterial, does not matter, because truly where metal has gone is largely due to their vision. So again, much props to them. How they treated their bands, like our own personal experience and so forth, I don't know. I mean, it's a mixed bag. We all make mistakes. When you take a bunch of excited teenagers and enter them into the business world and throw a bunch of new concepts at them, mistakes are going to be made. People sign bad contracts. We spend our money too fast. We spend money on the wrong things. It's part of the experience. But again, at the end of the day, it really is about the art. And through all that sort of reckless kind of energy, we ended up with an amazing sort of product. I really, again, I look back at that time frame and feel so privileged and lucky to have been part of it, because it really was a revolution in the sound, and it's still going. We were there when that was happening, so I was so lucky to be part of it.
Totally.
Recording process for World Circus down in Florida.
You guys went to Morris Sound Studios, like basically the most famous Floridian metal recording studio,
Yep.
Known internationally.
Yep. And we had options. They actually were willing to send us to other places, and we looked at some pretty high-profile studios. But Morris Sound was putting out the and they had Nasty Savage, and they had they had done a record from everyone that we respected, from every genre we respected. Like, they had done a Steve Morris from the Dixie Dregs, the guy who plays guitar now in Deep Purple. Mm-hmm. Steve Morris is like one of my favorite guitar players. He had recorded a record at Morris Sound. Nasty Savage had recorded there, like I said. Corner was recording there. Scott Burns was there. So that whole thing was happening. They had just done... what was that band? Crimson Glory. Crimson Glory had just recorded there, and Crimson Glory was very sort of Queens-likey in their production, which Mike, the singer, immediately was like, oh, I love that. So there was something for everyone in the band from Morris Sound, and it was what made us choose to go there. And the experience, and it's been written a lot, we've talked a lot about it, the experience was exactly what you would have thought it would have been. To be in Morris Sound in 1986, it was freaking amazing. It was awesome. Just the craziest, coolest people in the world around. Scott Burns and Jim Morris and Tom Morris are just gods at what they do, and they were then as well. It's, they were born gods, apparently. They probably will live forever. Yeah, man. It was pretty outrageous.
Yeah. I know Chuck Schildiner hung out with you and Tad and the rest of the band. He was a fan of Toxic, right?
Yeah. That's a pretty huge statement. I would say that he was one of our good friends down there. He liked us. He definitely did. He thought we were doing some cool stuff.
I saw a picture of him wearing one of your guys' shirts once.
No, he totally did. He did. He really, he liked us. And again, like you say, he and Tad were very, very close. They were buds. They hung out all the time. And he was a super, super nice guy, man. But with us, I don't even have to say it. Rest in peace, obviously. Very, very sorry to what happened with Chuck. Very talented guy, smoking, big brain, smart, big picture kind of thinker guy, man. Wrote great songs, played really great guitar, had killer lyrics, had a super unique voice. Just had it down. Knew how to put a great band together. Chuck was the shit. Chuck was the real deal.
Totally. Toxic, like even on like going back to World Circus, like the guitar playing is extremely very well honed for compared to a lot of other bands. Definitely a lot of and it gave it kind of definitely a unique flavor. What are some guitarists that you're into at the time, and how do you like learn how to progress into that kind of skill level?
Well, people that influenced me at that time were, I've kind of mentioned them already. John Roth was probably my largest influence from Scorpions. I loved his playing. I loved what he did. You know, when I first started taking guitar lessons, I actually had started on drums, and I played guitar for years. You know, as sort of just somebody who just played guitar. I didn't actually take the guitar seriously until I'd already been playing it for quite a while. You know, and I sort of remember my dad saying to me, like, you know, why don't you take some lessons? Why don't you take this seriously and not just, you know, fool around with it? You know, because he saw where it was headed. You know, what happens to teenage people is that they get into a scene where they're hanging out with a certain group of folks, and, you know, one thing leads to another. And for me, the group of people that I was hanging out with, unfortunately, the kids that were a couple of years older than me were all going to jail. And I think my dad saw that and was like, okay, I don't want them to go to jail, so why don't you start playing the guitar? And it's a reversal, right? Because most parents don't do that. Most parents are like, stay off of that thing, go get a real job. At least in my tax bracket, my parents were blue collar, so, you know, I grew up in a working house. You know, you don't guitar, what's that? You know, go get a job. But my dad was pretty cool. He said, you know, go get some lessons, go take lessons, take it seriously, be good. It doesn't matter what you do, be the best you can be at it, right? Any good parent gives their kid that advice. So I went out and I started taking. Of course, he didn't pay for my lessons. I had to pay for them myself, but that was okay too because I learned how to pay for stuff myself. I went to a guy named Lou Ubriaco, who was kind of legendary and still is actually from where I'm from. Again, about 20, 30 minutes up north from New York, northwest of the city. Lou was a heavy shredder from a band called Mighty Joe Young and Rat Race Choir, which were very popular in the 70s. And he and another guy, Steve Luongo, who was a super talented drummer. And I was lucky enough to be close enough to get to Lou's shop where he taught. I didn't have to have a car. I could get to it. I could hitchhike or ride my bike or whatever. I could get to it on foot if I had to. And it's because at that time I wasn't driving. So I used to walk to my lesson, and I had this crazy job. I would work at night. I worked at an AM PM, a 24-hour market, and I would work the night shift from 11 until 7 in the morning. And after 1 o'clock, you get the last customer. The next wave starts happening at 5 o'clock. Well, that would give me a 4-hour block to practice, and I would sit and I would play my guitar every night for 4 or 5 hours, every single night. And at that time, I was practicing a lot. Like I had Hello Waits was a big record for me, and I had learned all the songs, and I used to play along to that. And I was playing. I was actually teaching myself the rhythms that I liked at that time. That's how I was really getting into it. I think that anyone can play an instrument if they want to. Mm-hmm. I think that some people are more naturally inclined to certain types of playing. And I don't think you have anything to do with it. I know there's a lot of people out there that want to really kind of beat their chest, and I think you can overcome a certain amount of inability, too. I think there are people out there that can work around their non-natural talent. But it's very hard to be something that you're not. And I don't think everyone is engineered physically to play at that sort of guitar, if that makes sense, if you know what I mean. I think that you are naturally, or you are either born to do it or not do it. And that doesn't mean you can't be a great guitar player or a great musician in general and express yourself, but not everyone is going to be a virtuoso. Mm-hmm. I just seem to be lucky because, quite honestly, I didn't practice any more or any less than anyone else did. There was no secret, food that I was eating. I didn't have any, I don't have that story. I don't have anything special to say other than that. It just seemed to come natural to me. And I was really always kind of like shy about it because of that. I was almost a little embarrassed by it because I didn't understand it any better than anyone else did. And as a young player, I really seemed to be able to peel off some stuff out of nowhere. I mean, honestly, when Toxic got signed, I'd only been taking guitar lessons for a year. So, it was like, it kind of came out of nowhere, and it just sort of grew from there. So that's that.
How was the album received when it was released, and what was the touring like following World Circus?
The album was a mixed bag of responses. It was really positive from some people, and some people didn't like it as much. Again, metal is a very, very specific group of people. There's a regimented sort of acceptance or, disapproval of things based on one's personal taste. And people who were like into blacker metal, I don't think they got Toxic as much. On the other hand, people who were more open-minded when it came to, the rhythms and what we were saying musically, I think them that got it really got it, and we had really, really a great fan base that we have actually maintained until today. People who get Toxic love Toxic. So we felt that right away. You could feel it at the shows. You know, you could see it. You knew who liked you because they were, you know, stuffing the record in front of you and wanted you to sign it and couldn't tell you enough times how much they liked it. And people who didn't like it didn't show up. So that was cool. I guess that's what you know. That's when you know you have something. You piss off people that don't like it and people who do really like it. So I think we always kind of felt lucky with that we were one of those bands that seemed to have that kind of chemistry with our audience, you know. Well, and I'm sorry, what was the second part?
Where did you guys? I know that the tour you didn't go on a full tour, but where did you guys play? Especially go into detail on the Dynamo, who you played with, and what the audience was like.
As far as tour and support goes for World Circus, obviously that was our first tour as a band. Again, we'd only been really working at it for about a year when we'd gotten signed. We hadn't been at it that long, so we kind of went out there, not cold, but I would say when we hit the road, we had probably less than 20 gigs under our belt total. So we were pretty green on as far as the road goes, and learned a lot real fast because that's what the road does. It kind of kicks you around pretty quick. And we had a great time. I mean, it was phenomenal. Going out was just amazing. Our first tour we went to Europe. We did a bunch of small venues around the countryside that were just phenomenal. And I mean, we played in barns and, you know, pubs and just all over the place. It was just killer, man, to just take basically 4 kids out of, you know, their suburban world and drop them into this transcontinental experience. It's freaking amazing. And then, of course, it culminated that first tour with the Dynamo, with Open Air '89. And on that bill were some luminaries of that day: Exodus, Sabbath, Las Rocket, us. Trying to think of who else was Candlemass. Oh, I forgot to get Candlemass was there. I mean, it was. Oh wait, was Candlemass there? I can't remember, dude. Honestly, just to be completely honest, it was that long ago, and the day was a blur. All I can say about Open Air, you can see the video, is that it was amazing. It was amazing to watch. It was amazing to play. It was amazing to be at, because if you think back, that was the beginning of big rock festivals. That hadn't really started kicking off yet. And to have that many people in one spot unified and into the same thing was mind-blowing. For me, anyway. I mean, that was the first time I had experienced anything like that, you know. Totally. And it was really amazing to this day. So the day's a bit of a blur because of that. It was just almost overwhelming, you know. I still, to this day, 20 years, 25 years later, is still like, you know, wow.
Totally. And yeah, I didn't know that metal festivals are, of course, huge now. They have, like, every country has some at least one, and it's always huge, and everybody comes out, and it's all a really good time. You know, people coming out with the sort of, you know, same, you know, passion for heavy metal.
It's great. I love it. I love the festivals. In fact, with the announcement here of some Toxic happening in 2013, I've already gotten a couple of messages from a couple of different festivals actually asking us if we would consider coming out and playing. And it's a little early for that. You know, it's a little early to be thinking of anything like that, actually. But it's flattering, and it's cool to know that, you know, if we get this going the way we'd like to, there's probably a place for us to come out and do our thing.
Totally. And for those just joining, I'm talking with Josh Christian. He's the lead guitarist of the band Toxic. If you don't know them, check it out. It's spelled with a K. Got 2 great albums, World Circus and Think This. And they also have a few DVDs. One came out from Displeased. It's the Dynamo Performance. And another one comes straight. I might be sold out, but if you want to hit up Tad Leger on Facebook or MySpace or anything like that, he might have some copies left. So check out the music. Toxic has a lot of progressive influences, and certainly a lot of it stands out a little bit more on Think This. What were the different kind of I know not even just progressive, but also, you know, kind of fusion type music that you were into that or helping you to write songs for Think This, and even going back to World Circus?
Cool, good question. I had personally always been a fan of progressive music. Band UK, Alan Holdsworth. Later on, Terry Bozzio. Again, I was a drummer before I was a guitar player, so I had sat around as a kid and played drums to a lot of that music. I was a big fan of prog music. I'd always liked, Yes is another huge influence on me. King Crimson, So I had that in my blood already. It was already there. And I think you can even hear some of it on World Circus. There's,
Totally.
voice is pretty proggy. There's some moments where we kind of broke out some prog even on World Circus. On Think This was more of a, World Circus was a collection of the songs that we had written with the idea that we want to get signed. Think This was written from the perspective of we are already signed. It was more serious. It was less random. Again, when we're trying to get signed, we're putting out, a certain energy, hoping to attract, right? We're really, again, we're trying to get our music out there. And that's a very different energy than your second effort, which is, okay, now we're signed. How do you follow that up and progress? And that's kind of a hard combination. A lot of bands stumble on the second record. It's not easy to do. And I think a lot of people, honestly, if I'm really honest, I think a lot of people thought we stumbled on our second record when Think This came out. In perspective, there are a lot of people that like Think This more than World Circus. And they're typically prog fans. They're typically people who are more interested in the music aspect of it as opposed to the energy. Obviously, Think This did not thrash nearly as hard as World Circus did. I had also sort of begun my friendship with Ron Jarzambek at that point. He and I used to sit and talk on the phone for hours. Control and Resistance was out, and World Circus was out, and we were both kind of sitting home waiting for the labels to put us out on the road. And we'd become friends. I forget how. I think so he had our tape or we had his tape, and we ended up talking on the phone because there was no internet at that point. I think we pen palled back and forth a couple times, and then we ended up talking on the phone. And he and I would sit for a couple hours at a time and trade guitar stuff back and forth. And for me, that was huge because Ron is a sick, again, big brain. I was talking about Chuck before having a big brain. Ron Jarzambek is a big brain. That guy is thinking in an omnispheric sort of way.
He just came out. He came out with like an iPhone app, which is just absolutely ridiculous.
He's insane, man. He's nuts. Yeah, you can mix up his stuff. He's just crazy,
What other kind of guitar influences? Because obviously, even World Circus, it may not be progressive, but I think part of progressive is also kind of skill level. Ron Jarzambek is obviously a person that you mentioned.
Yes. Guitar-wise specifically, okay, I see what you're asking me. Guitar-wise specifically, well, Yngwie was an influence on everybody at that point. I did come out of that neoclassical school. It was kind of hard to avoid at that time because that's really what was pumping. Again, Lucky Gosh was at the beginning of a lot of this. Guitar shred was something unheard of before the mid-'80s. Shrapnel Records, Mike Varney, Shrapnel Records, Paul Gilbert, Greg Howe, that whole guitar explosion, cacophony, Jason Becker, Marty Friedman, all of those people. That was all at the same time we were happening. So there was sort of a rush, and I think that I think credit be given where credit is due. I think that Yngwie was really responsible for a lot of that rush. I think that he showed people that, hey man, you can break this sort of speed barrier that had been imposed before, and not to take anything away from the giants that everybody stood on the shoulders of afterwards. But Yngwie stepped it up, and then it has stepped up progressively since then to the point where we're at now. Where, again, kudos to Ron Jarzambek, just to jump back to Ron Jarzambek, who has absolutely stayed current and is every bit as much an influence and a contributor to that as anyone else, any other artist. The level of guitar playing now is insane. So, it's just nuts. But, all the people that I just mentioned, they were all an influence on me, all those guitar players. Of course, I'm trying to think. There weren't very many thrash bands that had serious guitar players. Out Skolnick and I, really, from the American side of things, I mean, Cacophony, I don't know if you could call Cacophony a thrash band. I don't think they really were. So if we're really going to say, thrash, that genre that was thrash speed metal in the late 80s, I can't think of anyone else. Detente. Other than that, I can't really think of anybody else that sort of did what we were doing. We were the only two guys that did that. And I always totally respected Alex's playing, but I don't think I was influenced by him because we were coming out at the same time. Same thing with Dimebag. I think he's an amazing player, but we were the same age. We came out at the same time. So I was influenced by what he was influenced by, if that makes sense.
Totally. And talk a bit about the lineup changes in Toxic at that time and going back to Morris Sound, being with, the absolute, engineering, wizards that the Morris brothers are.
Yes. Well, Think This, again, was a second effort. It was the second effort for Tom and Jim with us as well, and Scott, too. They knew us from the first record. They knew what to expect from us personality-wise, so the whole meet and greet was over. The honeymoon was over. The second record was much more about getting to work, and we really did work. Those were some really, really long sessions, really focused. I think Tom had more to do with Toxic than anyone else. Toxic was kind of like a pet project of Tom's. He really got us. He liked us. In fact, he used to feed me all kinds of prog music when we'd be there. He gave me a couple of cassettes. Like, he turned me on to Gentle Giant. I had never heard of Gentle Giant before Tom Morris. He gave me a copy of Octopus and pretty much changed my life. So he had a real soft spot for prog, and he was the guy that had recorded Steve from the Dixie Dregs. That was his project with Steve. So he kind of had an ear for prog music to begin with. And when we got there for Think This, I had come along in my writing, and the band had come along in our gelling and our ability to play things. We were more sophisticated in our writing, and Tom really latched onto that, and we went to town with it. It was really a lot of fun, and it was pretty intense work. We were serious about making a good record with Think This.
Definitely. And talk about you guys added another guitarist, and Mike Sanders was no longer the singer of the band.
Yep. And I'm sorry if I'm leaving gaps in that. We've talked about this a bunch, so it's kind of for me at this point. I forget to mention that stuff. Yes, Mike left at the end of World Circus. You asked me before how we were received. We were received really well. Mikey, unfortunately, was not received as well. Mikey is what I call him. Mikey is Mike's nickname, Mikey. And it must have been really hard on Mike to read a lot of what was being said about him in the press. It was not favorable. Mike's power metal style vocals over our sort of speedy mix-mash of influences just kind of put it beyond people's ears. And which, I have to be honest with you, and I'm going to throw this out there for my brother because I love Mike, and he's just the greatest guy in the world, and I love his voice on World Circuit. I love his voice. I didn't think he was saying any higher than Alan Kekio or Jason McMasters or, from Watchtower or, any number. I guess there's no real reason to actually finger names. I don't want to do that. That's not cool. But you know what I'm saying? Like, he was certainly not the only high-pitched singer out there. There seemed to be something extra to Mike's voice that pissed people off. I never really understood what that was. Because he really wasn't the only guy doing what he did. I don't think his voice was any more grating than, and again, I guess I just said I wasn't going to do names, but I got to throw this one out there. Joey Belladonna from Anthrax. I like Joey. He's cool. I love Anthrax. I think they've really contributed to the genre of metal over the years. But, like, in terms of annoying voices, Mikey's more annoying than Joey Belladonna? I don't know. I never got that. I can never figure it out. But anyway, and at the end of World Circus, when we got done with the tour and it came time to do the next record, we did the demos for Think This with Mike, and it was a combination. It wasn't Mike's best performance. His heart wasn't in it. Again, he had been sort of beat down by the press, and the label really poo-pooed it. They were not feeling it at all. They did not like his performance, and they kind of were ready to drop us. They were ready to let us go, and we were ready to quit. We were like, you know what? You don't want our singer, we'll leave. We were ready to bail on it because Mikey was our brother, and we weren't. That was a big part of the energy, was that we were such close friends. We really were close. And Mike actually kind of stepped up and was like, you know what, man, I'm not feeling it. Don't bail on the label. Do another record with him. I'm going to move on. And he did. And he split. He went out to California. And it was definitely more than bittersweet letting him go. We all kind of had to take applause on that. Life moves on. And Charlie, who sang on Think This, Charlie Sabin, was a local guy. He'd grown up a couple of school districts away. Again, we're suburban people, right? So we base everything on school districts. Chuck was from a couple of school districts away. Mikey was actually from Jersey. Mikey was from the farthest away. Tad, Brian, and I were all from more or less the same place. And Chuck was also from actually where Brian was from. So we were kind of geographically very close. Mike was the only one that was from far enough away. He was about an hour and a half away coming out of Jersey. But Charlie was a local guy, had a great voice, could always sing, never any question about his voice. He's a great singer, good guy, a lot of creativity, a lot of good ideas, and he just seemed like the right fit. I mean, honestly, he just was like the right guy at the right time. He was local. We had talked to the singer from Heathen who had just quit. The singer, I forget his name now, but the singer from the first Heathen album had just quit. And we talked to him a little bit. There was talks of that. He was out in San Francisco at the time. We were talking to Marty Friedman about producing the second record. We almost went out to San Francisco to do Think This with Marty. And that's where the Heathen singer connection came in. There was talk about, if we're going to be out there recording anyway, maybe we could get out there a couple weeks early and work this guy in. But we did a tryout with Charlie, and Charlie, came in and rocked out the World Circus stuff. He did a great job on that. He could really cut it. He was able to do Mikey's highs, but he was also had his own voice and was, had I don't want to say a better range, but he displayed more of a range than Mike did on the stuff. And he made the grade. He did it. We popped him in, and worked out pretty well, actually. John Donnelly, I needed another guitar player for all the crap that I was writing, and we were writing so much heavy, intertwined sort of, musical knots, musical term polyphony, polyphonic lines where, the bass player is playing one part of the chord, I'm playing the next tone of the chord, and the rhythm guitar player is playing the third tone of the chord. So the band playing in unison is actually forming one chord, okay? And you just can't do it with two guys. Mike O'Brien and I, as much noise as we could make, and we could make a lot of noise, we couldn't swing it ourselves. So John really fit in. He came in and he filled out the arrangements. And he was a great guitar player. He was an excellent rhythm guitar player. He was a good lead guitar player. He was younger than us. He was, I think John was only like 18 years old on the recording of Think This. At that point, I was already 21, and Brian was like 20. We were a couple years older than him. So, so Johnny came out and was a great guy and really held his spot down and was a lot of fun on the tour. It made a huge difference on our live sound, and we were much, much more polished on that second tour as a result of John and Charlie. I have to say that. The World Circus Tour was more fun. We had more fun, but in terms of our performance and how we played, although if Tad was on the phone with me right now, he might disagree with that. I don't think Tad really liked the performances on the Think This Tour that much. He and Charlie kind of used to lock horns a lot. So. But, yeah, there you go.
And speaking of the tour, King Diamond had hand-selected you guys to tour with him. Obviously, Andy LaRocque is in the same league as you guys with heavy metal and melodic and skilled soloing. What was it like touring with King Diamond?
That's a great question. And Andy LaRocque absolutely is every bit the guitar player than anyone else is. He's a freaking amazing musician, good songwriter too. The reason I didn't mention them before, I didn't mention King before, is because King, I never considered King in any way with Fate or by himself a thrash band. He did not. There was no thrash there at all. King took power metal and gothic and took it to an extreme. He had his own thing. He really did his own style. He truly, truly had a unique style. He was a very unique guy. And we were lucky. That was a phenomenal tour. It was a great exposure for us. It was definitely a different audience. I don't think a lot of King's audience were necessarily Toxic listeners, and it exposed us to a lot of people. Our sales showed that. We were selling a lot more records on Think This. And the experience was phenomenal. Working with Andy personally, myself and Andy LaRocque, I have a way of making friends with other guitar players. I always did. Whenever we did a gig, I would always sort of pal up with the guitar player and pick their brains. It's kind of how I do things. And he and I used to sit around in our hotel rooms and practice. Everybody else would be out getting and chasing girls, and he and I would be back in the hotel room rocking out, solos back and forth.
And speak about some of the gear you were using for both World Circus and Think This, because I think Tad told me that the gear that Chuck was using on the Human record was because of one of those rigs.
Yeah, yep, Chuck was digging my sound. When I came out to do World Circus, I had this real sort of funny little rig that I had put together. It was actually a Gillian Kruger ML2, which were these little cast steel amplifiers, practice amplifiers that had 3-inch speakers in them. And they had this really intensely compressed distortion chorus sound that they produced. And if you want a good example of it, the best example of it is the Daytona record, the first record there. I can't think of the name of it, Resist, or I can't think of the name of it. But the first Daytona record had the GK sound better than anyone else I had ever heard. And I was really influenced by the sound. I loved it. It was great. And so I went out and bought an ML2, and all of the World Circus songs had been written with that. And I ran that through a PV CS800 power amp, which is really a PA power amp. But in my experience, I find that the cleaner the power amp is, the more it catches or carries of the original preamp. I know a lot of people swear by tube power amps. We're getting into guitar player talk here, but that's what you asked me. I know tube amps are preferable, and they're the transient response. I mean, there's technical reasons behind that, and I agree with it. I love a tube amp. In fact, I only play through tube amps now, but they're not reliable, and they're funky with wattage. You know, you're traveling to Europe, your system is used to 110, and you jump into 220, dude, man, bulbs, tubes pop, things get weird. They're subject to all kinds of weird stuff. Solid state is bulletproof. So I had this old PVCS 800 power amp that I used to run through four 412 cabinets. I had four 412 Randall cabinets that I used. They were Celestion loaded, and I would put one on either side of the stage, and I ran it in true stereo. And when I was running the MLK through it, I used the stock MLK chorus, which really had a way of throwing my guitar sound back and forth between left and right of the stage, which really filled it out, because at the time, we were a power trio with a singer. It was just me and Brian, so I needed to fill in that space, so that's how I did it. I would run a cabinet on the other side of the stage with a heavy chorus, and it would really, again, spread it around. And the CS800 was so loud and had so much punch that when I hit my low E string, I'm not going to say I invented, the chunk, but I had the chunk as good as anybody, man. When I would mute that low E string and clunk on it, man, you could feel it in the back of your skull. It was just gunk, 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 gunk. It was awesome. And Chuck got it. Chuck was like, "Oh, that's sick. How did you do that? What is that?" So, that was, I think he copied me on that. And then when This came around, my technology came along. Technology in general was starting to pop at that point. I had a couple of endorsements. ADA actually sent me a copy of their MP1. They sent me the NAMM Show MP1 that they had been using, and it was dope. And I recorded the This album with that MP1. That was what I used on that recording. And at that time, I was using, I think I had my Mesa at that point. I think I was using the Boogie Power Amp at that point, I think. I can't remember for sure. I may have still been, at one point I had a classic 120. I had moved to a tube power amp, and I was using a classic 120. But you know what? It's really funny. On the Think This tour, I went back to the CS800. I went back to the BB for the tour, just because, again, it's so reliable. But I recorded, I think, with the classic 120. I think Think This was actually the 120, and then I bought the Boogie after that. So that's what it was. And again, with the same 412 Randall cabinets.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And I want to actually talk about some of the subject matter of some of the Toxic songs, starting off with TV Preachers. They're a subject of many of the songs, both World Circus and Think This. Of course, the era was wrought with, snake oil salesmen like those guys. List some of your favorite televangelists from the era and their crazy shenanigans.
Their shenanigans is exactly what it was. Candy Faye and Jim Baker were my favorite two to focus on, because they were just so maudlin, the way they looked. That woman, she would just get out there and, blubber with her, 3 inches of blue eyeliner, eyeshadow going up into her eyebrows. They were like clowns. Literally, she looked like a clown to me. And you're right, it was proliferating at that point. America was going through this crazy regressive thing, like it is kind of now, actually. Mm-hmm. And it was just confluence of Christian right fundamentalism sweeping over the nation. Yeah, remember, that was during the Reagan era. And I don't want to get into an economic discussion here because it's not metal, but there's a guy named Milton Friedman, and Milton Friedman had Ronnie Reagan's ear. Milton Friedman was an avid ardent free market capitalist, but he wasn't really a free market capitalist. He was a corporatist. Mm-hmm. And what we ended up with was a corporatization of the United States. That's when the real drug war begins. That's when we start filling our prisons with working class people. That's when we start, charging people to be sick, and suddenly our health care is, exceeding, 19% of inflation. It's insane, and it came directly from that time. And the Christian right were really part of that. They've always struck me, and I still wage to this day a war on that fundamental wing of the religiosity in the United States, especially. They are materialists to their core, and they are in no way godlike in their lifestyle and in what they preach. They exploit, they waste, and they are charlatans, basically. And I'm not a religious guy, but I have a huge bone, and you can probably tell that my voice changed as I talk about this. I have an issue with people who come across righteous, who use false righteousness to subjugate other people, to put it on other people, you know. Come and join me, brother. You will be saved and send me your money. You. You know what I mean? Like that.
Exactly.
Oh, that whole trip always made me irate. I just could never tolerate it, you know. And yeah, it manifested itself all over the both Toxic records. I was all about it. But you know, I want to say this because I'm sort of ambivalent about my relationship with the maker, right? I know, especially anybody who knows me from Facebook or has read my lyrics over the years. Sometimes I'm talking about God being the only answer, and sometimes I'm talking about there is no God. And if I can put any clarity on that for people, and I don't think you can in the soundbite. So there is an intelligence that we all share. You can call it common sense, or you can call it God, but there is a shared wisdom. People are as individual as their fingerprint, as the snowflake, and yet we all have so many of the same traits. Our humanity is innate. We are the same species. You can define that any way you want. If you want to make that be a little man in the sky who's watching over you because you need a big brother to look out for you, and that's what makes your day okay, man, I got your back on that, if that's what it takes. But don't make that be for everyone. Don't make that a one-size-fits-all ideology that you expect everyone to cop to, because that I will not do. I will give you your space. I will defend your space. In fact, I will go out of my way to make sure that you can have your space. But don't put your yoke on me. That's your trip. It's not my trip, okay? And I feel the same way I'm very libertarian, actually, in my thinking when it comes to that. Don't put your extraneous nonsense that you have going on in your life or in your mind on other people. Let people live their lives. Let us all live our lives, and let's be respectful of one another. I don't want to go Gandhi on you here, but it's a really simple philosophy. You don't have to be a genius to get this concept. Mm-hmm. You just have to treat people the way you want to be treated, and that is what Jesus said. I am a follower of Jesus because Jesus made sense. I don't know if Jesus ever stepped foot in the church, and I can't tell you for sure that Jesus is the Son of God. I don't know if I believe any of that either, but I'm pretty sure that Jesus, the man, absolutely was saying something that I could relate to, and that was treat people the way you want to be treated and love one another. And anything after that is mind control that someone else laid over to control someone immediately around them, including the Romans and everyone else forward from that point. We are all still stuck in this Roman thought process. And exactly. It manifests itself in my life, man. It's not just my music. It's my thinking. It's my philosophy. It is a very close subject to me, and I don't want to beat anyone over the head with it. I can't say what I just say and then be guilty of doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. So I put it out in my music because you can turn my music off. If you hear something that's objectionable and you're not feeling it, then you turn it off and put something on that is. I didn't make you do anything. Exactly. But if I can plant a seed and I can put something out there to run contrary to something that I believe is an innate evil that has been causing suffering for, a millennia, then yeah, man, I think the onus is on me, especially as I get older. The onus is really on me to do that anywhere I can, really. And I do. And my music is a vehicle for that, and I don't make any bones about it. It is. I do have an agenda. That's my agenda.
Totally. And the problem with making morality a matter of law is that it requires a policeman with a gun to come to your house and say, you need to put that joint down, or you can't marry someone that's of the same sex as you. And, they try to say that it's our moral righteousness that gives us the ability to use force, when really they claim morality. But you look at like Jimmy Swaggart sleeps with prostitutes. Always the people that try to claim righteousness are always the most immoral in their real life, rather than what they put on television.
Absolutely, it is immoral. It is immorality at the core to have someone stand over you with a club and say, "Do it this way," mm-hmm. no matter what it is. Unless I'm not hurting you, and I'm glad you used pot as the example, because pot is the perfect example. Mm-hmm. Pot doesn't hurt anyone. It may hurt the person who's using it, and there may be an issue with secondhand smoke, but both of those things can be mitigated. There's technologies now that we can get around these things. There is no reason. There is no suffering in it. It is a victimless crime. It is not a crime. Victimless crime is an oxymoron. If there's no victim, there's no crime. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Exactly.
So, like I said, I can go nuts with all of this stuff, man. This is really near and dear to my heart.
I happen to believe that if it were legalized, that most of Western medicine would become obsolete. Most industries would have some serious competition from industrial hemp applications. That a lot of people stand to lose immensely if this were to be legalized.
Preach it, brother. That's it. That's exactly right. You know, that's the church right there. That's the church of reason. The reason it doesn't come out is because it would put an end to this travesty that we've been stumbling along with now for 130 years. You know, absolutely. Biofuels are where it's at. Hemp is extremely potent on so many levels. It's such a wonderful plant. Totally misunderstood, man. And, you know, listen, and again, you and I have talked so much on, you know, we've gone back and forth. You always jump in on my posts, so I know where your head is at. I've seen how you think, and we totally are aligned on all of this stuff. And you know what, man? I'm kind of a buzzard at this point. You know, I'm getting a little bit up there in age, but I'm still very young-minded. And I find more and more people in your age group are really coming around to this. That old is going out, and they know it. And that's why there's so much fuss going on. That's why there's so much fight happening here, because these know they're on their way out. They're going, okay? We are replacing them. We are going to overcome. Ultimately, sustainability will outweigh their stupidity and their greed and their short-term gain. And unfortunately, a big part of all of that, just to round it back up to where the question came from, God plays into that. Organized religion plays to that deeply. It's the semblance that they use to organize people who have a trust in a maker. Christians, Jews, Muslims are genuinely good people innately. Again, I go back to the innate because it's what's at our core. As our core being, Christians are there because they want to do the right thing. Someone telling them that they're doing the right thing when they're not, in fact, doing the right thing, there's a psychological disconnect that goes on. And when you relinquish your personal authority, when you relinquish your responsibility to yourself and to what you know is right, and let someone else tell you what is right based on a scripture or based on whatever, you have lost something. You know what's right and wrong. You're born with that humanity. You know that it's wrong. But if someone else is in authority and you accept them as authority and they tell you it's okay, you will go against your own reality to fit their reality. And religion serves to create that, that specific school of thought comes from religion. Religion teaches us early on, gives us the imprint early on of authority, of the parent-child relationship. We can never truly be mature, responsible adults as long as there's the parent God above us, overseeing everything we do, forgiving us, punishing us, being the father. Inserting the father that doesn't exist, the hyper-reality father that isn't there, destroys our natural humanity. You are naturally good. You are not naturally bad. That is the lie of religion. And how did I get back to that? I'm not sure.
You're listening to KKSM Oceanside, AM 1320, Palomar College Radio.com.
How did I get back to that? I'm not sure.
Well, we were talking about TV preachers, but you know, like you said, that's totally the reason why, and you know, that's probably the start of the war on terror is creating instability in that region.
Yes.
Certainly, it's not just Israel or a Jewish thing, because we also support Saudi Arabia, who hates everybody else in that nation. So it's really kind of just a mixed bag of irrationality, and I think the top of it is military-industrial complex just scraping off, profit off of funding both sides. I was watching. I firmly believe, this is all going back to how the Federal Reserve was created. That if we were to audit the Fed, we would find that they would be funding both sides of World War II, just like all the banksters were doing business. Even like George Bush's came from a German-born Nazi descendancy, and they were like laundering money for the Nazi army. And GM was like dealing with the Nazis, and it kind of all goes back to how they just benefit from killing.
That's all documented. None of that is conspiracy. For anybody listening to this who has now said, look, listen to these liberals. Okay, that's all documented. Everything you just said is really true. That's 100% true. And I have to be honest with you. I have my suspicions because of that. This war on terror that's gone on for the last decade, there is a finite amount of money that's traveling the surface of the earth at any given time. We know what the currency flows are. We know how we can account. That's what accountants are for. We can account for what money there is on the face of the earth in circulation at any given time. We can account for it. So in order for the United States to spend $1 trillion engaging an enemy out in the desert, physics, just the science of the universe, would tell us that someone else must be spending a near equivalent amount to repel us. Yes, if we are spending this much money to do this accomplishment, and we are actually fighting someone, if we are actually fighting someone, then that opposing force must be spending somewhere. It may not be apples to apples, but they must be spending a gargantuan sum to keep up with that $1 trillion expenditure. Are you telling me that we can't find out who's spending that money? Are you telling me we can't follow the money trail? Really? Follow the money is the oldest thing in the world. Of course we can. You never hear that question. No one talks about that at all. And why don't they talk about that? Maybe because we're funding both sides of it. Maybe the reason it's $1 trillion is because we're paying for both sides of that.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I mean, that's really conjecture. But is it impossible? Absolutely not. It's totally plausible. And to say that it's not is where to accuse someone of being paranoid and a conspiracy theorist and all that is really part of the ploy. It is stupid to not think that that could happen because, of course, it could happen. If it has happened, it can happen. And we're back to rational thinking here, which unfortunately is not really part of the conversation. There's not a lot of rationalism going on. What you're saying is actually quite rational, but can very easily be turned on its head by people because the mainstream is really taught to believe that anyone who talks like that. In fact, Alex Jones did this thing last week, right, where he got on the phone or got on that show with, what's that guy's name?
Piers Morgan.
Yes, Piers Morgan, right. And he went nuts. And I think Alex Jones is a dubious character in the spectrum anyway. I don't believe in Alex Jones. I never really have. I think that Alex Jones is actually,
I'm more partial to Jesse Ventura because he's not sensational. He doesn't jump the shark.
Not like the way Alex Jones does. And I don't know about Jesse Ventura either. I don't know about any of them. None of us can. But I thought specifically, and again, we're not really talking about music anymore. I don't know if you're going to want to use any of this, but it's an interesting conversation, and I know you're into this stuff, so it's cool. I thought it was very interesting that Alex Jones got out there and did what he did. Alex Jones created a wall now for anyone that suggests now that taking automatic weapons or semi-automatic weapons away, because automatic weapons are already away from us, taking semi-automatic weapons away from people and assault rifles and bulletproof vests away from people and not taking them away from the police forces, anyone who suggests that that's the setup for a totalitarian state will now be called an Alex Jones. Oh, dude, what are you, like Alex Jones? What are you, an Alex Jones nut? That's what that performance really, I believe, could have been. I think because it was so outrageous and it was so sort of pretentious and weird the way he got all he does that excited thing that he does. I've seen him do that before, you know. And there's something really false about the way he gets worked up. It really strikes me as being super, super plastic. And now there's a title for people when they say, "Hey, man, do you think it's really a good idea to give up all of our stuff here if the cops still have it? I mean, does that make sense? Does it make sense to have?" In the meanwhile, Homeland Security has dumped billions and billions and billions of dollars, my Carl Sagan impression there, have dumped billions of dollars into the policing agencies around the country. Communities, man, towns, counties, state, all of these have been bolstered hugely in the war on terror and now have become completely militarized. Their training, their equipment, their surveillance, all of it is straight up military. Why do you want to de-gun the populace when you've got a completely militarized police force? Is it really that much of a stretch to think that they could become totalitarian? And I'm not saying that Obama's a socialist, and I don't think that George Bush was the Antichrist. I don't buy any of that shit. I think it's all political theater.
I think they're both Wall Street puppets.
Right, exactly. But I do have a real problem with a freestanding, completely fortified military fighting force now. I mean, honestly, man, with the level of training now that the police are provided with, and the cops are good people, man. They're just local folks like you and me. They're just taking a job. And next thing they know, they're in this program where it's good guys and bad guys, where everybody in a handcuff is a bad guy. It doesn't make a difference who it is. They become sensitized as well. And if you know the Stanford prison experiments, which I love to post all the time, you know that giving someone a gun and not letting someone else have a gun takes the person who has the gun and turns them into a monster in very short order. It only took a week in that experiment for those guys to start sexually abusing those prisoners. Okay, 1 week. 1 week. And these were mature, nice guys that were pulled off the street and picked for their normalcy and for their regular guy sort of attitude. And within a week, they were monsters. Okay, you do not want a sitting force fully armed and not having a response to that at the public level. And I know that puts me at odds with all of my liberal and green brothers and sisters, but I got to say, I think an armed populace leaves a balance in place for an overly armed militarized police force.
I've seen plenty of blogs by leftist thinking people that kind of like the revolutionary, the right to revolution on the part of the people, and what we were talking before of kind of like where this is all leading. I wanted to bring up, how Homeland Security is, trying to turn your neighbor into thinking that, oh, you might be doing suspicious, so let me call somebody up and give them an anonymous tip on something, that's totally subjective, that is up to my, understanding of and it's up to the whim, and really it's kind of just, we're like, Homeland Security just kind of picking up people off the street with the NDAA and everything like that.
It's Orwellian. It really is. I mean, I know that gets thrown around, but it's, if you've ever seen the movie Brazil, Blade Runner, these future movies, man, you want to know what the future is going to be? Read science fiction. I really feel like we're living in the middle of that. And I dread that, So, if I could sort of tie this back into the toxic thing, actually one of the things that's really pushing me to get something out here is that I have so much of this going on in my mind that I kind of need a vehicle for it. And Toxic was always such a great vehicle for me lyrically. The record's going to be packed with this. This is really what it's going to be about. I said to Mikey, because Mikey is not where I'm at philosophically. He's got his own thoughts and his own feelings, but I don't know if he's as radical as I am, and I don't know if he completely subscribes to my thought process. And I asked him, I said, dude, man, how are you going to feel about singing these lyrics? You're going to be cool with singing this shit? Because, it's going to be pretty heavy, and it's going to be from my perspective. And he was like, yeah, I don't care. It's cool. And I hope that is cool. I would be even happier if he was into it. I would be even happier if he read it and said, yeah, this is where it's at. Things that I find really personally important, I may sing them. I don't know, because I really want these to be words of conviction. I'm serious about it. It means something to me, so...
And speaking about some of those lyrics, in the Toxic song, especially with "Think This," is about how the media, it's just so kind of dumbed down. Everything is just cat fashion shows or no questioning of what the government does. And speaking of how that ties into today, modern times, like NBC actually for me tried to have me arrested. Me and a few people took after the Green Party thing for occupying the presidential debates. So I went with a Gary Johnson sign, a megaphone, completely peaceful, but I just started, talking, some realities on who's behind the Commission on Presidential Debates and what the Federal Reserve and the bankers have to do with, controlling the money of where it goes in politics. And all of a sudden they have some police officers coming out and telling we have a noise complaint. And so I put the megaphone away. Then they come back and they just start watching us. And until we leave, and it was just really eerie, and I know NBC did it because I saw their guards from the building, lurking around the corner when the cop was talking to us and laughing, and it's just, and then walking back towards my car, I see Homeland Security near the federal building in San Diego has a freaking rock star sized tour bus, like they are literally being cows off of our tax dollars. And, of course, money printed by the Fed, it's just kind of really building up. And a lot of our San Diego police are cross-deputized for both, Homeland Security and even the, war on drugs. We have state police that are supposed to act under state law for medical marijuana, cross-deputized, and now they get to raid, they get to be federal agents and raid medical marijuana dispensaries, all kind of really growing up to be this really eerie police state, and it's scary.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's always been about us and them, and just even a little bit of history, and recent history will show you that. I mean, if you get prior to the New Deal and you look back at the Gilded Age, it is exactly what's going on now. We've got a very, very small minority looking to control the majority, gaming the system to their favor, using the police and the military to do their bidding. Actually, the police and the military are actually inducted into the whole process. We no longer have a government. We have a corporation. Mm-hmm. We, by definition, are a fascist state now. Mm-hmm. I mean, we really are a fascist state because the corporation has... And we are, as a nation, we are so disconnected from our own reality. We live in denial as a culture, and it's horrible. It freaks me out. People will, to this day, just do not understand that they don't have any say anymore. In this past election cycle, people said, well, you got to get out there and you got to vote. Yes, you need to vote. You do need to vote. I'm not minimizing or diminishing what a vote does. A vote is important because it gives you a sense of empowerment. It puts you into play. It makes you feel like you've got some say. But, of course, it's totally symbolic because of the Electoral College. It really doesn't mean very much at all. It's going to go in the direction that your state goes in. And through the process of redistricting, they've managed to completely corrupt the system. So we really don't have a vote at all. The vote is an illusion. That's first, okay? And we know, just by virtue of the way things are run, that the money in Washington is all that matters anymore. These people are on the dole. They are being paid to legislate in favor of the industries that are paying them. Very simply, too. And this all gets complicated. There's an obfuscation that goes on where this all seems to be much more complicated than it is. And for people who aren't into this at all, it goes right by them because of that. They think that it's more complicated than it is. It's very simple. The corporation gives money to the elected official. The elected official introduces a law that benefits this corporation in some way, and it's myriad ways. I mean, it could be anything. Who knows? It's environmental. It secures them more market share. It gives them a shot at more land. It's endless what the benefit is. And then that legislation gets written and it gets voted on, and you and I never hear about it. How many is it? 4,500 laws a year, or 23,000 laws a year, or whatever it is. It's ridiculous. It's an insane amount. You and I have no recognition of that at all. There is absolutely no accounting at all. You and I have no way of knowing what that is unless we want to go and spend every waking minute trying to keep track of it. Who's going to pay your bills? This is intentional. Who's going to pay the electric bill? Who's going to pay the rent? Who's going to pay for the food? You don't have time to do that, so it goes on unabated. You have no choice about it. You are stuck here, and it's going to go on. My brother, that is fascism. You no longer have control of your government. You no longer have control of where your tax dollars go. You no longer have a control of your environment and what your environment produces and provides for you. You deal with their poison food, you deal with their poison air, and you pay for it in the process. You pay for it with your time, you pay for it with your life. You get sick and you pay for it with your cancer. You get antisocial and you pay for it in their jail. You get poor and you pay for it at their war. It doesn't matter. We are paying for it. It is on the backs of us.
Totally.
The triangle is perfect, okay? And it's total barbarism, man. It is as exploitive as possible. Again, just reading People's History of the United States again here by Howard Zinn. I read it once before and I kind of skimmed it. It was at a different point in my life, and now I'm a little more focused and I'm reading it again. And the first chapter is about Columbus and the Indians and what went on. And dude, man, the barbarism that this country is founded on is unbelievable. Literally a hell on earth. And of course, Columbus, the classic false Christian, the classically false Christian, used Leviticus time and time again, the book from the Bible, used it time and time again in his writings and in his letters back to Spain, justifying what he was doing and even bragging about it, even bragging about the generosity and the vulnerability of these good people and their generosity as he literally hacked into them. And we, as people who are sensitized to a certain amount of violence through the media anyway, that doesn't mean anything to us until you read the actual accounts of what went on. And, they talk about, they would sharpen their knives, and just to make sure that the blade was sharp, they'd grab some 10-year-old little girl by her hair and carve a piece of her arm out to be sure that the blade was sharp.
Wow.
Just little stories like that. Let's put the horror in perspective. Let's put a face on this, okay? Because that's where it all comes from. And our nation is based on that. Our nation is founded on that. I do not hate America. I love America. I love the principles that America says it stands on.
But we're not there at all.
At all. And we've never even made an attempt to be there. You and I get to experience the Constitution in the visceral way. We live it. Working class people, we live that. We have to experience that. At a certain point, wealth and privilege exonerates people from the Constitution, from God's law, from all laws. Money, him who has the gold makes the rules. That's the golden rule. So,
actually, what's his face? One of the guys that were, one of the main people behind the Federal Reserve said for the Mayor Rothschild,
I care not who makes the laws of the land. Show me who controls the money.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is, like how Think This is about the media controlling everything. You're not going to find out that every single dollar of tax goes to pay interest on the debt owed to the Federal Reserve. Like, there's a reason why certain few groups of rich people don't pay any taxes, is because all our tax dollars are going straight to them, and then they just print the rest to cover the funds of government. So it's really just a giant Ponzi pyramid scheme where they're going to take everybody's wealth and concentrate it to themselves, and then dole it out slowly. And it's kind of like but their credit spree, I think, will come to an end when this all comes to fruition. Unless they just scrap the dollar and go with some new sham currency. It's all a giant scheme.
Well, what we have is state capitalism now. We don't have real capitalism. Doesn't exist. There is no such thing as a free market. And I'll tell you, and again, you mentioned Gary Johnson before. I like Gary Johnson a lot, and we talked about that, you and I before. I don't believe that we can have a free market. You probably know that anyway, right? You know what my take is on that. Unless we redistribute resources and we break up the oligarchs, there's no way to have a free market. The big fish are going to eat the little fish. And really, there is no market without some regulation. There's certainly no market without a central currency. And a central currency automatically denotes a legislating body because someone has to preside and administrate that currency. Ergo, there's no such thing as a free market. There will be a centralization in the chain. It's just inevitable. That's why market alone is not enough to structure a society around. You cannot structure a society around production and market, and it just doesn't work. You cannot do it, and I don't care what anyone says. I know there are a lot of people that want to believe that, but the reality is it cannot work. And I think the main reason for that is, I think the real reason that most people don't ever stop and consider. I had a conversation with a guy from a bank not that long ago, a couple of weeks back, a representative who was getting ready to retire and had worked at a bank called Community that I have here in my part of the country. I don't know if they're anywhere else, but they're here. And Community Bank has actually weathered the whole storm pretty well, the financial storm. And here's a guy who's getting ready to retire from it. And he's talking about his pension. And he's we're starting to have a little bit of a conversation, and he immediately goes into, disparaging the poor, the people that are spending his money. I'm sick of paying for these welfare cheap. He starts to chew on his neck, and, it's all I can do to not, smack the guy around. Because, you work for a bank, okay? You, of all people, your entire existence is predicated on a lie. Banks are a lie. All our fiat currency, the only thing that backs that, there's no gold anymore, is the production of the people. Ultimately, our currency is based on what you and I do, what we make. Bernie Madoff never made a thing in his life. He moved money around, okay? Hedge funds managers and people like that, they don't make anything. They move money around. They're not productive people. They're the parasites. Any person who could sandbag or save $1 billion, let's say you've got an equity and you're worth $1 billion or $2 billion, you have to be a sociopath to have that much money because you're never going to be able to spend that much money. And that money could do so much good for people that are suffering. So for you to actually warehouse that energy that way says a whole lot about you as a person. I like to be comfortable, and I like nice things, but I don't want to have other people suffering so that I can do that, so that I can have that. And I especially don't need a multi-million-dollar buffer to be sure that my kids and my grandkids will be able to do that. That's a dynasty of luxury based on the suffering of other people. All money is a metaphor for suffering. That's all it is. You're going to go out and you're going to work and you're going to produce, which is going to enable someone else to sell, which is going to generate what we call money. Money is an illusion. There is no money. Do you understand the money? Are you, Alex, and I know you are, I can tell just from what we're saying. Do you understand, the concept of the money multiplier? Do you know that? Fractional reserve, 10%.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's how the Fed is, they loan out more money than they actually have, which,
Correct.
Puts people in debt and just creates, but they're the ones that are, they're the bad loaners. They're the ones who are loaning money that they don't have. If I was, a bank and I looked at the Fed, I wouldn't, loan to them on any rational basis.
Of course not. Of course not. Well, their charter, the Fed's charter, is actually is constitutionally added. Their charter comes from not their reserves, but from our productivity. Their charter is based on that they're going to lend us money at a 10% to 90% ratio. So that's the irony of all this. Not only are they giving away $9, okay, they've got $1 in reserves, they give away $9, they lend out $9. They just lent out $9 that they actually didn't have, okay? And then they collect interest back on that 90% extra that they already put out. It is such a double screw, you know. And again, most people don't know it. I started to tell you the story about Banker Bob here the other day, and his name really was Bob. Banker Bob had never heard of the money multiplier. He did not understand. 66 years old, banking for 38 years, did not understand the basic concept of fractional reserve. Very, very simple. You have $1,000, and I'm going to say it real quick. You have $1,000 in reserve. You can make a $10,000 loan. I come to your bank, Alex, and I borrow $10,000 to you from you to buy a car. I go to the car dealer. I hand him that $10,000 check. You had $1,000 in reserve. You're now allowed to lend me $10,000. I take that $10,000 check, which $9,000 of it is puff. I give it to my car salesman. My car salesman goes and deposits it in his bank. That bank deposits it as cash. Now that bank has $10,000 in its reserve, and it can lend $100 out from the $1,000 that it began with. That next check at $100,000 goes into yet another bank and gets to lend out $1 million, and then $100 million, and so on and so forth. That's the money multiplier. There is no debt because there is no money. It's all bullshit. There's nothing there. It is completely an illusion. And when I said that to Banker Bob, man, dude, I swear to God, the guy looked at me like a puppy. He twisted his head to the side and he blinked. He was like, "What?" I was like, "Are you telling me you don't understand this? You've never heard of it?" And he's like, "No, I don't know anything about it." Either he's a liar or he's a fool or he just doesn't want to know. But when I told him about it, he said, "Well, that's an oversimplification." No, it's not an oversimplification. That is exactly what it is. And that is what the Fed is doing with our country. So when we talk about balancing the debt and economic freedom, there is no freedom. You cannot have freedom in an economy because the economy is based on debt. Right off from the get-go. It's every 9 cents of every dollar or 90 cents of every dollar comes to us in the form of debt before the interest gets piled onto it. It actually costs us money to borrow the money. It's freaking crazy. And this is the spot where I usually find myself really agreeing with hardcore right-wingers. This is where the left and the right converge because we can both see where the falseness of that is. It's where we go after that where the divergence really kicks in. They really want to go back to, and you may actually be part of this group, and we're closer than you think if you are. Most people want to go back to a purer form where the market drives it. And again, going back to what I said before, I don't think we can do that. I don't think we can get away with the market because the market has profit built into it. And as long as we're profiting, we've got the greed motivation. And I don't care what anyone says. I don't write music to make money, man. I never did, and maybe that's why I'm not a very, very rich guy living in my mansion and my yacht. But the reality is, I never played music. I never picked up my guitar to make money. But I never thought of that once. I am pretty darn sure that Einstein didn't do what he did to earn money. I just don't think he did. I don't think that guys like that, like me, like you, like creative people, I don't think we think in those terms. I think we do what we do because we're driven to do it because it's our human spirit that wants us to do it.
Yeah, I have not been paid 1 cent for doing any of the things that I do, radio, music, or otherwise.
You do it because you love it. You do it because it's creative, and you provide a service, and you give people something to listen to and to think about, and you create, brother. You create. You leave the true legacy. The money is air. It's a false legacy. There's nothing there. The creativity, art is our only real manifestation. The building that I'm looking at, I'm sitting out in my car this whole time I've been sitting on my car shooting it here with you. I'm looking at a building, and it's a nice structure, and it's brick, and there's some metal, and there's some glass, and this came out of somebody's idea, out of somebody's mind. This was an idea. This was a drawing. This was a concept, and this was made for money because I'm sitting in front of a strip mall. But it's still a creative thing. Now, the mind that created that would have created that without the strip mall needing to be here. They would have still been pushing. They would have still been designing. They would have still been placing bricks on top of each other because it's symmetrical, and that's how their brain works. And they would do that no matter what. We would be productive with or without the finance attached to it. The idea of the minority profit mechanism is slavery, and it's old, and it's done, man. It's done. Mike Rupert. You ever see Collapse? Have you ever watched that?
No.
Check it out. If you get a chance, anybody listening to this, get a chance, go watch Mike Rupert. Michael Rupert's the guy that actually broke the story about the drug ring during the Bush years. Go to Alameda there. Into the airport in Arkansas. I forget. Whatever. He broke that. That was him. That was his story. He was the guy that did that. He's an LA cop, and he's a real kind of, salty dog sort of old guy. He says that we're past peak oil, that this is all a lie, that there's no more room for any isms, not communism, not capitalism, not any of the isms. We're about to be faced with a really, really ugly world in a very short order, and if we don't stop this primitive thinking of ours, we're going to be in trouble. And I think he's right. I really believe that. I think all of this is just stalling what we really need to do, which is to get down to how we're going to survive as a species. I've got kids. Having kids makes you think about all this stuff a lot more. Being a parent really does help you focus your mind around this. And for me, it's a legacy thing here. I don't want to see generations coming after us and enduring this. It's 60 degrees right now, Alex. I'm sitting in Syracuse, New York, which typically in the middle of January 14th, whatever the date is today, normally would have 2-degree weather, might be my high, 3 degrees, 4 degrees. I mean, we have very, very cold temperatures in the winter and typically 500-600 inches of snow. I'm in that part of the world. That's what I get. I'm in shorts. My window is open. My leg is literally out the window. I got the seat kicked back. I'm talking on the phone in shorts, okay? Something's up, man. The weather is acting, the weather is a response to our industry and our, inability to manage our greed and our climate. And this is just, I really think we're right at the beginning of all this. I think it's just going to get worse and worse, man.
Totally.
Unless, of course, we do something about it. At the end of the day, I really am still an optimist. I do believe we can get a handle on it. I think, like I said before, this is the old guard. They're going out. I just hope we can get them out in time so that we can bring it back around, because this is ugly, man. I'm tired of looking at, Barnes & Noble and Michael's and Pier 1 and Raymore and Flanagan and Denny's, Kentucky Fried Chicken. This is no kind of life. Where did this landscape come from, man? This is insane,
Totally. And, those wouldn't exist if they actually wouldn't have laws to protect them. And
right.
And of course, people controlling the flow of credit, through this Federal Reserve economy that we have. Some people get it, some people don't. And it's unfortunate. Rather than, I was interviewing a guy who has a hemp seed food production company, and he's talking about how much burden he has because of established law that was set up by established companies that really is designed to have a few like billionaires, rather than people planting a hemp seed and then try or fail. They could fail. The possibility of failure, but something as productive as a hemp plant, could make somebody, enough for a comfortable living, so you have a bunch of people that, get to benefit truly from their labor, rather than right now where we have our labor stolen from us through just inflation from the Fed printing everything that it buys from, the fractional reserve loaning out money that they don't have. Is really the root of why, we have, the 1% versus the 99%. And it's even less than 1%. It's like,
yes.
people, like 100 or so people, and even less than that. When, for example, like the Bilderberg group they have, the group, and then they have the, executive committee, which I believe one of our senators is a part of, one of the Rockefeller senators that we've had from the Rockefeller family is on the executive committee of that group. So literally less than 1%.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't know that, but that makes perfect sense, of course. But I do, of course, Bilderberg is absolutely real. Bilderberg, there's, again, that's another one of the ones that gets conspiracy thrown at it. But of course, that's real. That's totally legit.
Definitely. And going back to, like, I like to differentiate, like, I don't consider like libertarian or anything to be right wing. That's why I found myself more in common with the Greens and everybody else than Republicans or Democrats, that kind of people that abuse the term market really mean corporate controlled market, rather than people, which is pretty much corporations existing as an individual above the law, rather than you and I engaging in voluntary consensual behavior,
right.
that is to mutual benefit. Otherwise, we could consent to leave that engagement.
Right, the mutual exchange. The mutual exchange is completely missing. There's nothing mutual about it. It is so one-sided and top-heavy, And
that's because, these corporations, they are legal individuals, and then they get to, of course, they have people lobby through the revolving door of Congress to pass laws that instead of a mutual exchange, there's a policeman with a gun in that exchange, whether on our personal levels or going back to, the top of all finances with the Federal Reserve. You cannot use another currency. That's why, you know, like it would be way cool if we had, you know, like all the different localities experimenting in alternative currencies, whatever that may be, and you get to pick and choose. And if you still want to stick with this crappy dollar that we have, by all means, you know, pay $10 a gallon of gas in 10 years, or not even 10, 2 years from now. It's really where we're going to be headed, is massive inflation.
Well, we could be. That's one possibility. And, you know, inflation is, and again, we could go on about this. This is one of those conversations where you can really, really get carried away because, you know, and I'm with you actually right there when it's funny that you sort of separated your libertarianism from other, what you would consider right-wing groups because
they try to take the term and then abuse it like Paul Ryan or Glenn Beck, like all these phonies, like and then they make the, you know, the corporatist old or like right-wing arguments for, you know, which is really, you know, they're paid to do that. You know, they're just like Obama is, you know, supposed to sound like a liberal at the podium, but you go behind a closed door and he's, you know, giving tax breaks to GE and Goldman Sachs, so they end up paying zero in taxes. Of course.
Goldman Sachs runs the world. Inflation, of course, is not a real. What inflation actually is, and again, you know, I'm not so sure that a lot of people do. Inflation is a false term. Inflation is actually the devaluation of your currency. Mm-hmm. You're not paying more for something; your dollar's just buying less of it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And it's one of those false sort of view kind of things. It's been taught that this is inflation, that the price is going up. In fact, the price isn't going up; the value of your currency is going down. And when you start to look at it that way, that gives you an entirely different feeling of what it is. People can get their heads around the price of things going up because there's more people. There's a lot of reasons for prices to go up, and people are trained to understand them and accept them. But it's very hard to understand why your currency might be worth less.
And we don't learn that because we don't want people looking at the Federal Reserve.
Of course. Right. You don't want to know about that. You don't want to know about what causes fluctuations in currency and how freaking, you know, people, entities out there make unfathomable fortunes when there are bumps in currencies, when currencies drop and dip and other, you know, it's an insane game. It's once again, but what are they really buying? There's only so much money that you can have. It's not money anymore. It becomes something else. Mm-hmm. And it's not even power because there's only so much power you can have as well. It's something else altogether. It is dominance. It is absolute dominance by the few over the many, and they're privileged. They're, at this point, you know, we have created a many-century-long aristocracy in this country and really Western Europe. But now we've pretty much sold the franchise globally, and central banks and fractional reserve banking is the standardized form globally. The whole world basically uses it. There's a couple of countries here and there that don't have central banks, but everyone uses fractional reserve.
When they don't, we go to war with them and make them.
And we go to war with them. That's exactly right. When they don't have a central bank, that's the first place we go to, you know. We're still trying to get into Syria. They're still trying to get into Syria, man. It's been 10 years. I remember the PNAC. I remember that. They took that PNAC website down. It's a big new Brzezinski, but his chessboard was secure that entire region, including Iraq, Iran, Syria, you know, parts of Pakistan, all of that. That's all part of that same grab of that land to secure that piece of oil there. For what purpose? There's only one purpose. There is only one purpose for that. So them to control the energy, control everything, man. Energy is really at the bottom of it. It's our reliance upon the specific type of energy, which, again, you can actually go right back to Rockefeller and finger for that. Rockefeller made it so his product was the only thing that anyone would use. Diesel was competing with him. You probably know the story of Dr. Diesel, right? You know, with the biofuels, you know that, right? Alex, you know that story?
Oh, well, I know. Of course, he, you know, went for laws that completely banned, or like at least made it, you know,
prohibition. Prohibition, brother. Yeah, Rockefeller was responsible for prohibition. It became illegal to have any kind of mash at all. You could not do any sort of mash. You could not have that refining process where you actually started to ferment mash.
And that's how you make diesel, right?
Right. And that consequently, filling stations that used to carry diesel and gas, or primarily peanut oil, is what diesel engines were originally designed to drive on, could no longer carry this mashed peanut oil because it was illegal thanks to Prohibition. And by the time Prohibition ended, diesel fuel was out. And the distillate of diesel fuel that comes from petroleum is actually much less clean than the biofuel that it was originally designed to run on. You don't need all the filters. You don't need all that crap. Peanut oil burns as clean as it possibly could, and its emissions are like completely benign. And Dr. Diesel lost, and Rockefeller won, and we now see what the legacy of the oil man was. We are here now, okay? And again, it's just like Columbus with the Indians. Our country is based time and again on these ruthless models, these ruthless principles that we eventually lionize and create as heroes, or try to. I mean, Rockefeller and Carnegie and DuPont, and these guys all went way out of their way with endowments and charities to create this illusion of them being good, corporate citizens, when in fact their charity was just a manifestation of their absolute greed and the guilt for their greed,
Exactly, and
I know you know.
Yeah, and guess who was sitting on at that meeting in the early 1910s on Jekyll Island where they drafted the feds? It was Rockefeller, Morgan, Warburg, and Rothschild, and not anybody from Congress.
About Warburg. That's right. Paul Warburg was a big hand in all that. Although his name is not nearly as well known, but yes, and his brother. What was it? Didn't his brother manage? Didn't his brother do something for Hitler? Wasn't his brother like a manager in the Gestapo or something? He did something. I know Paul Warburger's brother was involved in...
Well, I know they had a lot to do. Of course, they stole a lot of Nikola Tesla's inventions, and that actually has to do with a part of George Bush's descendancy, where his German family actually were German born. Some of them engaged with the Nazis, and I think it was his father. I was just watching Oliver Stone's History of the United States, and they were talking about how Prescott Bush, I think it was George Bush's father, laundered money for the Nazis.
Yes. Ain't that something, man?
Yeah.
Dude, listen, this is an awesome conversation, and I know it probably I don't sound like much of a heavy metal musician when I talk like this, but I'm really, to be honest with you, I would much actually rather talk about this, because for me, the music is almost like a biological function. It's sometimes hard for me to talk about because it's such like a natural state for me that I can't really sit around and theorize on it because it's just something that I do. It's weird for me. It's like, talking about music sometimes is difficult because I don't really think about it like I think about this. This I actually engage my cerebral, portion of my being around. Whereas with the music, I don't so much. It's kind of just natural,
So let's shift back to music a little bit. So you mentioned Toxic for 2013. Talk a bit about how the reunion started out. The kind of complications with the documentarians. They have a freeze on the footage. The new album, and what are you thinking about for 2013?
Okay, cool. Well, the documentary back in 2007 was actually what was the impetus or the sort of the inspiration for the reunion, which was sort of ill-conceived, and that's why it didn't happen. You never want to put a rock group together around a documentary because you end up being Spinal Tap, okay? And it really was. It was just a circus. It got thrown together, and everybody was so excited. We're always surprised by the level of sort of love that people seem to have for us, Phil. People really genuinely Toxic, for whatever reason, just occupies a place in certain people's minds, man, and they have a genuine affection for us. And you can really feel it. It's an awesome feeling, I got to say, man. It's got to be, I feel like the luckiest guy in the world to have experienced that, because I don't think that that's something that everyone in a lifetime really gets to know. Somebody really connects with you through your art like that. It's super, super positive thing. So, 2007, if nothing else, really kind of made me aware of the fact that we had that type of friendship out there with people. I didn't know that, and it was really great to find. So 2007 absolutely served the purpose, but the band was not ready to come together. We were all in very different spaces. My kids were still little. Hard for me to put a lot of focus into the band when I was providing for my family. It just wasn't the right time. So fast forward 5 years. 6 years now because we're 2013, but it's really about 5 years from when we were doing the documentary. Still, it's not quite fully six years. This last year, I have spent a lot of time writing. I've been writing a lot of music. I was working with Tad with Luce Tola. You mentioned Luce Tola early on. Tad's got this great doom band that he's doing called Luce Tola, which is really, really good. He's written some freaking amazing songs. It's a great concept. It's a perfect merger of Tad's favorite kinds of music and his favorite passion, horror. Yeah, Tad is a huge horror buff, and it's just a perfect merger for him. I sang on the Loose Ritola disc. I helped him facilitate the recording. We got together and we brainstormed, and we did a really great recording, and I'm getting him the WAV files actually today. This is good timing conversation-wise. I'm kicking him the final files today so he can actually print that up, and he's going to be pressing it, and we're going to have that released.
Awesome.
I am not going to be able to continue with Loose Ritola. I know you didn't ask me about this, but it kind of figures into what's going on with Toxic. I am not going to be able to continue with Loose Ritola, and for no other reason other than logistically, it's about impossible. Loose Ritola is a live and performing band where all of the members live 5 hours away from me, 4.5 hours away from me. Mm-hmm. I just can't really make the practices. I don't have the time. It's too much of an expense. It's $100 round trip every time I go, and it's a whole weekend. And I work a lot. I run a business. I've got a family. I do a lot of things. I'm starting this guitar business now. I mean, I got all this stuff happening. I just could not give it the dedication that I needed to give it to make it real. And I don't want to, and I'm really saying this from the bottom of my heart. This is no nonsense. I told Tad as much. I love Tad. Tad is my brother, okay? Mm-hmm. The family. I've known the guy for 30 years, and I love him like a brother. I don't want to f*** his band up. I don't want to screw his band up by not being able to give it my all. And that's what it needs, because they're going to go out and play live. They're really, really serious about getting out there and doing it live. If I'm going to do something live, if I'm going to dedicate myself and put myself into something, me now personal, Josh, if I'm going to put myself into something that heavy duty, it's not going to be Loose Ritola. It's going to be Toxic. I mean, Toxic it hasn't finished. It hasn't finished itself. It hasn't been able to really. I still feel that there's a door to close, that there's a chapter to write. There's something more that Toxic needs to do, and as much as I would love to do Loose Ritola, if I didn't have Toxic in the back of my head, I probably would have kept doing that. But in a way, I got to thank Tad again, because Tad was really influential in the early stages of Toxic for helping me shape the direction of it. Tad once again kind of pulled me out of my shell here and made me realize that I need to do something here with Toxic on a personal level. So it really did kind of start with me. I just kind of had sort of a snap decision, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do Toxic. I want to do Toxic again, and I started calling everybody and kind of lighting a fire under them, because everybody's got their own lives going on. But, everyone's pretty excited to do it. I don't think Tad is going to be able to make the trip with us. Loose Ritola is, as mentioned, is kicking, and he's got his thing going on. He's not playing his drums as much. He's playing a lot more guitar. Mm-hmm. And, frankly, the stuff that I'm writing right now is actually more intense than old Toxic. And what I mean by that is that it is more technical. It is faster. It's more angry. My sort of, me personally as a writer, my energy has matured a lot. And when I was a kid, when I was a young guy writing the stuff for Toxic, I was only 19 years old. There was still a lot of optimism and joy in my life. I hadn't lived a lot yet, and times were different. After another 25 years now, I've had a very different experience. And again, I'm still young-minded. I'm still here on the ground. I'm still living it. I'm still real. But my venom is got a lot more acid in it now than it did when I was a kid, and my writing is reflecting that. My writing is pretty intense right now. Toxic had almost kind of a buoyancy to it. There was a bounce in some of Toxic's music. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that bounce will be present this time around. I don't know. I'm not as happy a guy as I once was. I'm much more intense. And that may work out. That may be really cool. People may really relate to that, because I think a lot of people are feeling what I'm feeling. Everything you and I just talked about is right on the tip of a lot of people's tongues. So maybe it's the right kind of vibe for the time. I can only be what I am. I don't want to be fake. I don't want to come out and write something that I think somebody wants to hear. Hey, I'm going to formulaically here, going to write this thing that people are expecting. Nah, that's not, I never did that. That's never been my trip. I'm going to do what I do, And I really hope that people still like it. I hope that I still meet and greet and make people happy that like to perform, maybe even in the process add a few new friends along the way. No matter what, it'll be honest. It's going to be intense, like I just said. I expect a very high caliber of musicality from everyone. I think it's going to be a real contribution to the sort of prog metal world. I think it's going to be proggy. That's it. That's what I can say about it now, because it's as far along as I am. Do I know if we're going to tour? I don't know. I haven't gotten that far with it. I don't even really have a drummer worked out yet. I'm programming all the drums myself for the demoing process. Brian's got the songs he's working on them. Mikey's got songs he's working on them. I'm talking to Charlie. I might get Charlie in on some of the vocals. I'd love to get John Donnelly involved. I really want to try to get all the old Toxic people involved. That was my original idea. But I don't think John wants anything to do with it either. His life is busy, with his wife and doing what they do. So I don't think he's feeling the Toxic thing. So it's looking right now like me, Mike, and Brian for sure, with the possibility of Charlie jumping in. Tad may change his mind. He may see what we're doing. He may hear something that may really kick his ass and get him inspired, because he loves Toxic too. Mm-hmm. My affection for Tad is totally reciprocal. I know that Tad totally values and respects me as much as I do him. And if I come out with something that's really balls to the wall, he's liable to get excited and want to be a part of it. And he can be a part of it no matter what. Even if we found the world's greatest drummer, Bobby Jarzambek comes and plays on the next Toxic record. If Tad stood up and said, "Dude, man, can I do this?" I'd have to let Tad have the gig. So that's where it's at with that. Tad has first dibs. But looking like right now, I don't think he's going to make it.
Definitely.
That was a long friggin' answer. Sorry.
No worries. And you guys were working on new material for a third album called Blood, Guns, and Oil. Am I right?
Uh-huh.
I think what was going on was that Tad might have been playing on a few tracks. Are you what do you have so far that has already been written, and also what's going to be the recording process like once you find a drummer? What can people look forward to for how many songs, anything else? Right.
No, that's cool. It's cool. It's all I every time you ask me a question, I go, I want to say, I don't know. I don't know. But I do. I kind of do now. Let's see. Well, I'm not planning on using much of the stuff that I wrote in 2007. I might use the track Blood, Guns, and Oil, and I keep saying I very unanimously. I want everyone to know that's the only reason I'm saying I is because I'm the only one sitting in the car right now on this phone call. We, band collectively, are not really officially an entity beyond phone calls. Mm-hmm. I'm generating music. These guys are excellent players. We have great chemistry because we've stayed friends. Ergo, the band is functional at that level alone. I'm not worried about us being able to play together. It's never been an issue. We'll be able to do that. But at this point, for me, as the songwriter, the principal songwriter, I'm not really feeling too much of the that I did in 2007. I like it. It's okay. Again, like I said, it's okay. I don't know. It could just be, songwriter disease where your new stuff's always better. I don't know. I'm not feeling it as much. The newer stuff that I've written over the last year, I feel packs a much harder punch, is much more in the direction I want to go. I can't really say of any bands that if I say it sounds like this and it sounds like that, and that belittles what I'm doing. It's just an honest effort. So, it's new. It's new and it's different and it's heavy as hell. It's really, really, what I will say is that it's heavy and it is technical, but it grooves pretty friggin' hard. It's actually heavier than old Toxic, which again I hope is a good thing. I hope that people can still relate to us. It's definitely more brutal. The recording process is right now. I have a studio in my house that I've built over the last few years. Went from being a little spare room to now being actually something pretty legit. I'm doing most of the tracking right now myself. Over the last couple of years, I've been doing some producing, and normally when I produce, I work with singer-songwriters, and I play all the instruments on their stuff. I'll go in and I'll program the drums, and then I'll do the bass and the keys and the guitars. I'll play the stuff. If I had a kit, I would play the kit on a lot of it too, but I don't have a kit, so I have to program the drums. But it's usually coming out of my head. So and kind of used to be the same way with Toxic. I just didn't have the technology with the old formation. I just didn't have the technology. I'd go in and show parts, and then we'd work on them together. So now what I can do is I can actually throw my parts down, shoot out the files to the guys. They listen to them, and then what I'm going to do initially. Again, this is all initial stages. My thinking is to get them one at a time to come and play their parts, and then actually have that serve as sort of a final demo. So like kind of a two-stage demo process. Mm-hmm. Demo from Josh's brain to other guys do their parts, we reform the demo, then sit back, look at the demo, make any tweaks we want to do on it, and then do the final recording from there as a group. So by that point, we should have our drummer in line, and then we go in a room and we drop it from the ground up like a real band does. We play the songs live. The rhythms get done live. The bass, the drums, and the rhythm guitars all get tracked live. and then we do overdubs on vocals and guitars as need be, which is the standard way you do a recording. I definitely do want to catch the live energy of a band, though, so it will not be, sort of studio sterile Josh solo record with other people jumping in where he was. I really want the band to gel as a band on the tunes, so there will be a warm-up period to that where we're going to have to rehearse a little bit, and, we've got our work cut out for us. It'll be what it'll be, but there's certainly enough time to do it. We're talking about January 2013 right now. That gives us a whole year to work on stuff, because I kind of threw it out there just very loosely that something in 2013 will happen. That means we could drop something, December 31st, and it would still be 2013. So we've got time to come up with something real. And that's it, man. We're going to hone our craft and see if we can't come out with something that's so metal that, it just kind of redefines what Toxic is and again, keeps the people that used to listen to us still happy. And that's it, man. Just make it as good as we possibly can, which is all we've ever really done.
Definitely, and that's definitely because with the advent of being able to shoot somebody a file sort of like the way Blotted Science does. You have all their guys living on different parts of the earth. Even with they have a new drummer, I think, from the Netherlands. It makes it so much easier to get everything together.
Yep, and especially with music like we do, not that we're anything like Blotted Science, but in a way they are sort of similar genre-wise in that they're, heavy arrangements. It's actually a great way to work on this kind of material because what happens, the inspiration in progressive music doesn't actually happen in the recording stage so much, although it can happen when everybody's together. But I think you get more, at least for me anyway, the way I approach prog is very different than the way I approach rock and roll or if I'm doing blues. If I'm out playing blues, I don't even want to be warm. If I'm going to go out and do a blues gig, if I'm playing guitar somewhere and I'm doing some blues, a show where I'm playing a bunch of blues, I don't even want to warm up. I want to hit the stage cold. I want my hands cold, and I want to plug the guitar in and start from scratch. And there's something real raw about the way you approach that. Well, prog music isn't that. That's not how you do prog. You do prog, you focus, you get it together, you really iron out the parts, you really think it through, you really make a statement. It's art. It's constructive art. It's a different kind of approach. It's not visceral and seat of your pants, although there's that element to it because it's still rock and roll. It's still got the metal drive. But there's an art to it. There's a craft involved. So flying finals back and forth is really a great way for this type of music to find itself. Because I can sit back and I can listen to what Brian did on the bass, and I can say, dude, man, you are freaking killing on this, but how about we try this in this section? I like that, but how about we do this? And that way we can actually write some songs together, which is another thing that we didn't do a lot of the last time around. We may, in fact, actually end up working much more collaboratively this time around because of this format. So I'm really excited to see what that does, especially with Brian specifically, because Brian is a heavy wig. Bass player Brian, who's kind of a quiet guy, doesn't talk as much as I do, certainly. Doesn't really get heard as much, and I don't think people really realize what an impact he had on things, too. He's a really, really technical, high-minded kind of guy, very bright dude, can hang in there on any of the shit that we've been talking about. He'd be right at home, and then he could add to it, and then he could go into his whole, own mechanical engineering thing, because he's very mechanical. And that his sort of aptitude for mechanics and things lends itself to his bass playing. And he is a very, very well-articulated player, man. He can really play a lot of stuff, which pushes me. You know what I mean? If I got a guy that can play, 30-second note triplets, I'm going to write them because I want to hear them. I love that. I love the idea of I love bungee jumping with the guitar in my hand. You know what I mean? It's like, how far can we push this thing? What can we do? And even if we're kind of old dudes, I think that's kind of what makes it even more fun is being a little bit older. That's where you find the inspiration. That's how it ends up not being the same old. I used to dread going out and playing the World Circus songs towards the end of the Think This tour. I used to dread it because they were a couple of years old, and I get burnt on stuff. My brain, that's just the way I am. I get tired of things really easily. I don't think I could come out and do another World Circus or Think This. It's going to have to be new. It'll have to be something different. So, Brian being able to contribute this time around through the writing process will be great. I'm not sure who the drummer's going to be, but I'm really hoping we get someone that comes on, and when I hear him, it makes me want to change all of my arrangements. You know what I mean? I hope we get somebody that's like, oh, my God, this guy can play that. Well, then scratch that. Let's do this. I hope that it grows itself. I hope that enthusiasm is there because you as a listener, people as listeners, feel that. They're not aware of it, but they can feel it because it's a real thing. It's a tangible thing that happens, and that's the spark when you're doing something prog. You're triggering each other, you're pushing each other, the musicality is coming up, and then you come together and you play it live, and it's like, holy shit, you made all these puzzle pieces fit together. There's the joy of that. Man, it's such a great kind of music form to play within. I just love it. And once again, giving my hats off to the genre that I owe so much to. Heavy metal is such a wonderful art form, man, because it incorporates all of this. You can do anything almost underneath the heavy metal moniker and still have it be what it is. You know, I just happen to be lucky in the fact that I hear really dark and heavy things naturally. So I'm a natural for it, you know, because I'm not really what you would consider like a metal scene person. That's not really where my head is at. I'm more into my art and to thinking. But I naturally am kind of a dark spirited sort of person. So my music comes across with that, and I'm lucky that way. I have a built-in audience with it. So, yeah, man, I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be kick-ass.
Definitely. And, you know, with the title of Blood, Guns, and Oil, definitely very relevant, given that from Think This to now, nothing has really changed as far as the status quo has gone. You know, Bush to Clinton to Bush to Obama has been nothing different, only been a worse progression in the police state and the military state. Definitely looking forward to some of the relevance that is going to be dropped down on that album.
I'm thinking about adding one word to the string: blood, guns, and oil, money.
Yeah.
I'm almost thinking about throwing money in there somewhere. I'm not even kidding about that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to sound like blood, sugar, sex, magic. You know, I'm scared of, you know, sounding like, you know, people relating the 5 words together, 4 words, whatever I remember words. But, you know, I almost want to work money into the title. I almost changed that. I was almost thinking about getting rid of the blood, guns, and oil as a working title, actually, because for a couple of reasons. Because it's already been around for as long as it has been. But I'm really glad to hear you say that. That kind of validates it a little bit more for me. Because I think you're right. I think you're 100% right, Alex. I think it is still as relevant as it was 5 years ago. I don't think things have changed enough. In fact, I think things have actually gotten worse in the last 5 years. I don't think they've gotten better. You know, so really.
With the drones, like we have non-military CIA employees sitting in an office building in the U.S. literally playing video games with other people's lives. They have a screen in front of them, and they click the button, and they drop a missile on somebody, and those people's children die. And we, you know, not to take away from the people that died in the elementary school shootings, but we see their faces. We don't see anybody's faces that gets killed overseas. And do those people's children matter less than ours? I don't buy that.
No, they don't. No, they don't, man. And that's your libertarian spark kicking in again, man. That's your free-mindedness. I'm 100% with you on that. You know, suffering is suffering, and I don't care if it's my kids or your kids, man. Mm-hmm. And that's my bar too, man. That's interesting to use children. Children are my bar. Anything that affects children adversely, anything that hurts kids, I'm against. I don't care what it is. I can't justify it. I don't give a. If kids are being hurt by it, then it's wrong, and I don't want to pay for it. And it's one of the things that makes me absolutely irate about our system, that I have no say in where my tax dollars go, and the fact that I've got to foot the bill for this drone program. Do you know that I'm in Syracuse? You can Google this, and I invite anyone who's still listening to this to do that. My Air Force base up here, Hancock, is actually one of the strongholds for the drone program. We run drones out of here day in, day night. They fly in out of here. 24 hours a day. Oh, really?
Yeah, we have one in San Diego. Well, of course, we have, you know, every district has somebody, getting support for military.
It's not novel anymore. Yeah. A couple of years ago, it was really unique that Syracuse had that, and now everybody's got it, so it's not as novel as it once was. But we specifically, a lot of people have been arrested at this airport for protesting, you know, and it's you know, it happens. It's almost like, you know, kind of monthly at this point, that somebody gets popped, and it's a little big stink is what I like to call it, because you don't hear about it nationally, but they make a huge deal about it, like a terrorist has been caught, you know, in Homeland Security's net here. It's like another protester was arrested today with ties to blah 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 blah, and there's this sort of vagary that goes on that makes everyone sound like they're working with, you know, Bin Laden's ghost, and it's just absolutely retarded, man.
Exactly. That's going back to, you know, how Homeland Security is trying to turn everybody into, you know, like a lookout for the suspicious person. The cop that harassed me at NBC wanted to make sure we weren't America's most wanted. Of course, he even wanted to get my information so he could plug it into the system. Right. But you know, it's you know, calling people that are peaceful terrorists just, you know, to silence political opposition. And, you know, we have the same thing going on here. We have General Atomics is the local drone manufacturer, a little bit East County, San Diego. They another group, the Veterans for Peace, have protests of their. They're probably not right on their property because they don't want to get arrested, which is good. I guess the point is to have cars driving by, see all the things, but they manufacture the drones here. They actually might be the ones that are manufacturing a technology for a death ray, like instead of missiles, these drones will just have lasers.
Yep, I know about the death ray as well, and the sonic cannons, dude. And there's so many. There's actually tons and tons of what's considered actually non-lethal technology that, in fact, is being developed under the guise of non-lethal technology, using the licensing that allows them to develop weaponry under that heading. And then, of course, with the flip of a switch, it becomes lethal technology. All of these technologies have been developed under the Non-Lethal Technology Act, which is part of the original Homeland Security Act. And the thing of it is that again, when you get back into it's kind of almost elitist sounding on our part because it sounds like we know something that no one else does, and it's not that. It's the information is literally blocked. If people knew what was going on, it would not go on. People would respond to it accordingly, but because they don't know, because they're so completely distracted with the mundane and nonsensical, man. Watch American Idol. Watch the infotainment news. Turn on your Fox. Get boxed in. Go find the next device to fill the void for your emptiness. And keep going, man. Keep going. You're a work unit. We need you to be profitable. Don't let the terrorists win. Get out there and shop. Just to give people an idea of progress ETA wise. Maybe start getting some tracks back from Brian and Mike here in February and start working on it so that, maybe there's a couple of different possibilities, too, on how we're going to do this release. We may release it in 3-song chunks rather than do one solid release. One of the thoughts is if we do it in 3-song bits, like every couple of months drop 3 songs, and then finally with the last 3 songs, put it together as a collected record, you know what I mean, so that you end up with 12 tunes. You asked me about track number before. I keep bouncing around with the number 12 because that gives me a chance to put out 4 sets of 3 songs. And then on that last set, culminate maybe with a 4th song, maybe even have a 13th song, I don't know, do something just to keep people interested. Because it does seem like folks are interested right now, and if we wait another year to come out with product, I don't know, we've already kind of threatened once to come out with something and we didn't. I don't want people to think we just did the same thing again. So we kind of inadvertently released that we were getting back together. It came out a little bit sooner than I would have liked it to. But now that the information is out, I think it's incumbent upon us to act quickly and strike while the iron is hot. Again, not to sound like an old business guy, but it is what it is. People are interested right now. I want to meet the interest, not from a sales standpoint. I'm not talking about money. I'm just talking about interest. When people are aware of you, they're aware of you, and you want to, not take advantage even. That's even a bad word. I want to pick and choose the right words here. I just want to come out with something when people are wanting to hear it. I don't want to do what we did last time, which was drag our feet. So I'm planning on cutting to the chase and just keep an eye out, man. Keep an ear out for what's happening. We're really looking forward to it. I know I'm going to have to speak for Mike and Brian at this point because they're both gung-ho on the project. They're definitely in on it. They're really excited. I just hope we can come out with something that does the toxic name justice and serves, the metal community and says something politically and socially as well in the process, man. I hope it meets a lot of fronts. I got high hopes for the project.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much for stopping by the show, Josh. I've been talking with Josh Christian. He's the lead guitarist of Toxic, spelled with a K. Got World Circus out. Think This on iTunes. Was re-released by Metal Mind in 2007. Be sure to pick it up. Check it out. Do you have any particular songs that I should play after this?
You're asking me?
Yeah. Anything you want me to play?
I think you should play both albums end to end at the end of this. No, I'm only kidding. Probably. How about one favorite from each record? Voices from World Circus and Black and White from Think This.
Sweet, definitely. So this is Voices from the album World Circus, and then Black and White from the album Think This by Toxic. And I've been speaking with Josh Christian, lead guitarist. Josh, thanks for stopping by the program.
Brother, thank you so much, and thanks everybody for listening, man. I appreciate it.
All right, so you're listening to KKSM Oceanside, PalomarCollegeRadio.com, and AM 1320. Here is Voices and Black and White by Toxic. Be right back with the NAMM Show. KKSM, the Radio Revolution. Black and White by Toxic, and before that, Voices by Toxic. My guest for this last hour was Josh Christian, the lead guitarist of Toxic. It's spelled with a K. Certainly one of my biggest influences. Got to know these guys over the past few years. I've jammed with Tad, the drummer, a few times, and I was trying to put together a gig with my band and Believer a long time ago, but the venue never really responded and kind of like just became a lost idea. But I kind of suggested to Josh maybe to play bass, but it never really happened. But I kind of just, as I was beginning to form as a shredder and a guitarist, Toxic was certainly one of my biggest influences, still is, and certainly great, not just playing but songwriting to fit the playing. And I think that's one thing is to be technical, but to put that into songwriting and making it memorable and stand out, that's a whole other thing that not many people get.